We are here to learn about the beliefs of Judaism, and so here we go. You should have your note sheet out. It will look like this, okay, if you want to use the graphic organizer side, or it will look like this if you want to use the outline side. You'll see that there's some things already filled in, but you're going to have to add some information to the note sheet. So get your pencils ready, and you're ready. Let's do it. Beliefs or Judaism. As you watch the presentation, take notes on the note sheet. Feel free to pause the presentation, rewatch it, whatever, so you can get all the info. Jewish beliefs aren't just about religion, folks. They anchor their whole society. And to remember what those key beliefs are, there's 4. I've come up with a little acronym for you. Beliefs play an important role. R-O-L-E. Righteousness and justice, belief in one God, observance of religious law, and belief in education. So let's look at the role of religion, okay, by looking at these 4 things. First, righteousness and justice. Righteousness, doing what is proper even when others aren't. So basically, kind of doing what is right, making good decisions, being ethical. Justice is another one. Fairness in dealing with other people, helping strangers or criminals, giving to the poor, helping the sick, helping orphans. These are all examples of doing justice, of making the world a fairer and better place. You can see that in the picture. Jewish organizations were a big part of the civil rights movements in the 1960s because of the Jewish belief of righteousness and justice. That's our first. Our next key belief of Judaism is belief in one God. That's our O in role, one God. Judaism is widely considered the first monotheistic religion, and that was different than other ancient religions. And we know that after studying Egypt and everything. Many Jewish people won't even say God's name because it's considered too holy, okay? And they believe that they have a special relationship with God, and God guided history through the leaders of the Jewish faith, through Moses, through Abraham, etc. Okay, so belief in one God, monotheism, is the next key belief of Judaism. Third key belief of Judaism is observance of religious law, okay? God gave them laws to follow, and the most important is the 10 Commandments, okay? The system of all the laws that God gave are called Mosaic law after Moses, okay? And remember, the idea is it was the Jewish part of the covenant to obey the law, and God would protect them and give them Canaan. So this is all part of the covenant. Laws guided all of daily life. For example, the Mosaic law establishes the Sabbath to rest from Friday to Saturday. Okay? It established laws for eating. So people who follow Mosaic law can't eat pork. They can't eat shellfish because it's considered unclean. They have to eat food prepared in a certain way called kosher, and you've probably heard of that. And it involves a few different rules, like you can't mix dairy and meats, and you have to have everything prepared in a certain way, and that's called kosher, and that's part of this religious law that they need to follow. There's different levels of obeying the religious law, and you can see that in the different kind of sects of Judaism. Orthodox Jewish people follow Mosaic law very strictly, while Reformed Jewish people do not follow as many of the Mosaic laws, and conservative Jewish is somewhere in between. Observing the law is part of Judaism. It's part of their part of the covenant, and that's the third key belief of Judaism. And the last key belief of Judaism is the importance of education. In the ancient world, ancient boys, not girls, would study their religion with professional teachers or rabbis. Okay? Today, teaching children the basics of Judaism is still important, and many of you probably know that from going to Hebrew school or having friends that go to Hebrew school or studying for your bat or bar mitzvah. Education and understanding about the religion is a big part of being Jewish, and that's the fourth key belief of Judaism. So to recap, the important role of beliefs: righteousness and justice, belief in one God, observance of religious law, and belief in education. Okay, now make sure at this point that you got some good information added to your note sheet about those 4 key beliefs of Judaism. You got it? Awesome. Let's move on, and we're going to talk about the Jewish texts. Jewish texts are where those beliefs are kind of expressed and explained. So we'll go through a couple of the key ones. The first is the Torah. The Torah is considered the most sacred text of Judaism. There are 5 books found in the Torah that contain the history of the Jewish people until the death of Moses. Every synagogue or a Jewish house of worship has at least one Torah in it. Out of respect for the holiness of the Torah and the importance to the faith, people don't actually touch it. They use a special pointer to read from the Torah. It is their most important religious writing, the Torah. There's also the Hebrew Bible, or the Tanakh. The first part of the Tanakh is the Torah. Okay, but then it contains some other parts as well. The second part of the Hebrew Bible is called the books of the prophets. Prophets are people who receive messages from God to be taught to others. Okay, and so the messages that they gave in the course of Jewish history are in these books of the prophets. The final part of the Hebrew Bible are 11 books of poetry, songs, stories, lessons, and history. And included in these are the Proverbs from Solomon, which you guys just looked at some of them, and the Psalms written by King David. These are kind of poems and songs written to kind of honor God, to talk to God. It's really kind of a way of worshiping God. King David was considered a man after God's own heart. Okay, and he very much spent a lot of time writing these different psalms. So the second Jewish religious writing is the Hebrew Bible. One of the things you'll see is there's a lot of overlap between the Torah and the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. And again, we'll talk more about that when we talk about Christianity. Another example of a Jewish religious writing is the Talmud. The Talmud is also known as commentaries, which essentially means kind of explanations of religious writings. And these were produced between AD 200, that's cut off by the picture, but so you know, produced between AD 200 and 600. So this is like a long time after a lot of the events of the Torah and the Jewish Bible, but it kind of explains it, okay? And they explain the laws and they give lessons for life, and so you study them to really have a deeper idea of how to practice your Jewish faith, and that's the Talmud. Last example of religious writings are called the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're exactly what you think they are. They're scrolls that were discovered around the Dead Sea. The first ones were found in 1947, and once they realized that there were some scrolls with some ancient writings on it, they started searching everywhere, and they found dozens after that. Most of these Dead Sea Scrolls were written between 100 BC and AD 50, and they contain prayers and commentaries and letters and passages from the Hebrew Bible, and they really give us a good idea of how people worshipped and believed during that time. Those are our Jewish texts. Hopefully you got some good information down there. And now I want to talk a little bit about Jewish holidays. The first Jewish holiday is Hanukkah. Hanukkah falls in December, and it honors the dedication of the Second Temple. If you remember, the temple was destroyed, right, when the Chaldeans invaded in Jerusalem. Okay. Once the Maccabees had their successful rebellion, much later, they rebuilt the temple, and this is the dedication of that temple. After their victory, they wanted to celebrate, but they didn't have enough oil. And so they really only had enough oil to burn a lamp for one day. Okay, but in a miracle, the oil lasted for 8 days. And in honor of that, and to remember and celebrate that, Jewish people in Hanukkah light the special candle holder called the menorah for 8 days. And lots of times during Hanukkah, they exchange presents or celebrate for 8 days to remember this happy time in Jewish history. Our next Jewish holiday is Passover, and we talked a little bit about this when we talked about the Exodus. It usually happens sometime in March or April, and it is a time to remember the Exodus and God's delivering them from slavery. You can see here in the picture that they're eating a special meal called a Seder, and the plate that's being passed around there is called the Seder plate. Each of the different foods on there helps the people celebrating to remember the different parts of the Exodus and the life in Egypt. So each has a different meaning. Also during this time, to remember how quickly they had to leave Egypt and that they didn't have time to let the bread rise, Jewish people don't eat bread during Passover. They only eat a cracker called matzah, which is unleavened bread, to kind of remember how quickly they had to leave Egypt and to kind of remember the sacrifice that the Jewish people made during that time period. So this is a happy holiday that kind of remembers God's deliverance and God's faithfulness to them. The last holidays are called the High Holy Days. The first is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the new year on the Jewish calendar. One of the things that happens during Rosh Hashanah is they blow the shofar, which you can see in the picture. It's a ceremonial horn. Okay, these usually happen, by the way, in like September or October. And then the other high holy day is called Yom Kippur. Okay? Yom Kippur is the holiday, it's a solemn holiday where Jews ask God for forgiveness of sins or forgiveness for the times that they broke the Mosaic law, which everybody pretty much does, right? In order to do that and remember, they fast through the day. So lots of Jewish people who are observing Yom Kippur don't eat and don't drink to kind of keep their mind on God and asking God for forgiveness. So these two holidays are usually pretty close to each other, right? Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in September or October. Okay, guys, that's really it. I went through the different Jewish beliefs, the Jewish texts where those beliefs are written, and the Jewish holidays where they celebrate those beliefs. Now, I would really suggest that you take a second and maybe talk to a partner at your table and see if you have the same things, or if you feel like you missed something, you can go back and rewatch the whole presentation because I'm just that exciting. But if you feel like it's good, why don't you raise your hand and tell me, and I'll check it over for you. Okay? See you around.